What if your inability to focus has nothing to do with laziness, discipline, or intelligence, and everything to do with how your brain is being fed? Consider this carefully. You sit down to concentrate. You want to think, to read, to work, to stay with one thought long enough for it to deepen. And within minutes, something inside you pulls away, not dramatically, subtly, a restless itch, a need to check, a sudden urge to switch tasks. You don't feel distracted, you feel pulled. So here's the uncomfortable question most people avoid. If you truly wanted to focus, why does your mind keep betraying you? You live surrounded by stimulation, constant signals, tiny rewards, endless novelty. Your brain is never starving anymore. It's overfed. Every scroll gives a hit. Every notification gives relief. Every new piece of information promises something better than the last. Not meaning, not depth. Relief. You are no longer seeking satisfaction. You are escaping discomfort. Silence feels heavy now. Stillness feels wrong. Boredom feels threatening. And the longer you live this way, the harder focus becomes. Not because you forgot how, because your brain adapted. Dopamine culture didn't make you happy, it made you dependent. Dependent on constant stimulation to feel normal. Dependent on novelty to stay engaged. Dependent on interruption to avoid discomfort. This isn't about attention spans shrinking. It's about tolerance collapsing. Your mind no longer tolerates slow rewards, delayed gratification, effort without immediate payoff. So focus feels painful. Thinking feels exhausting. Depth feels inaccessible. And the world tells you this is normal. It isn't. It's conditioning. You are living inside a system that trains your brain to crave distraction, then shames you for not being able to concentrate. This video isn't here to motivate you. It isn't here to give you productivity tricks. It's here to expose why focus became rare, why boredom became intolerable, and why a brain raised on constant dopamine struggles to stay with anything real. If you've felt your attention slipping away year after year, if you've sensed that something external is shaping your inner life, stay. Subscribe to Soulless. This channel exists to explain what modern culture is doing to your mind before you mistake adaptation for personal failure. Your brain was not designed for constant reward. Your brain evolved in scarcity, not abundance, not saturation. Reward used to be rare, earned, delayed. You moved, you struggled, you waited. And when reward arrived, it meant something. Dopamine was never meant to be constant. It was meant to be directional. A signal that said, "This matters. Pursue it." Modern culture broke that signal. Not by removing reward, by flooding it. You now live inside a reward-rich environment that never turns off. Your brain receives stimulation before it has time to recover from them. Last one. Not pleasure, hits. Tiny, frequent hits. Enough to keep you engaged, not enough to satisfy you. This is the first fracture. Dopamine is not the chemical of pleasure. It is the chemical of anticipation. It pushes you toward the next thing, the next update, the next scroll, the next idea. When anticipation never resolves, focus collapses. Because focus requires something dopamine culture destroys: patience. Patience is not passive. It is endurance in the absence of reward. Your brain is losing that capacity. Not because you're weak, because it's being trained out of you. You notice this when effort feels heavier than it should, when reading feels slow, when thinking feels tiring. Nothing is wrong with your intelligence. Your reward system is miscalibrated. Your brain now expects payoff immediately, and when it doesn't arrive, it disengages. This isn't choice, it's conditioning. Every app you open trains this reflex. Every swipe reinforces it. Every notification deepens it. Your nervous system learns a simple rule: if stimulation drops, seek something else. So when you try to focus, your brain interprets slowness as threat, as deprivation, as something to escape. That's why boredom feels unbearable now. Boredom used to be a gateway to imagination, to reflection, to depth. Now it feels like pain. Not because boredom changed, because your tolerance did. Tolerance only develops when reward is scarce. Scarcity builds endurance. You removed scarcity, so endurance decays. This is why your focus fractures even when you care deeply about something. Care isn't enough anymore. Your brain asks a different question now. Where is the reward? If the answer isn't immediate, attention wanders. This creates a false narrative. You believe you lack discipline. You believe you're broken. You believe others have something you don't. They don't. They're just numbed in the same way. Dopamine culture didn't make you distracted. It made you impatient. And impatience is the enemy of depth. Depth requires staying past the point of stimulation, past the initial discomfort, past the urge to escape. That urge now arrives sooner, stronger, more convincingly, because your brain has learned that escape is always available. This rewires motivation. You no longer move toward things, you move away from discomfort. You don't pursue focus, you flee boredom. And fleeing is not agency, it's reflex. Your environment trained that reflex perfectly. Every platform competes for your attention by offering immediate reward. They are not fighting your discipline, they are replacing it. Your brain adapts because adaptation is its job. It becomes efficient at switching, bad at staying, efficient at scanning, bad at settling, efficient at consuming, bad at creating. Creation requires delayed reward. Consumption provides instant relief. So your brain prefers consumption, not because it's lazy, because it's been optimized for it. This optimization has consequences. Focus is not a switch. It is a state that requires calm, tolerance, and low noise. Your brain is rarely in that state now. It is overstimulated, restless, expectant. So when you try to focus, you feel resistance. Not mental resistance, physiological resistance. Your nervous system is agitated. It wants movement, change, relief. This is why willpower fails. Willpower is not stronger than conditioning. You cannot out-discipline an environment designed to override you. This is not about blaming technology. It's about understanding exposure. Your brain mirrors what it lives inside. Live inside constant reward, and it will reject anything slow. This is why deep work feels unnatural now, why long conversations feel rare, why silence feels uncomfortable. Your brain is not malfunctioning. It is doing exactly what it was trained to do. And until that training is reversed, focus will continue to feel like force, not flow. This is only the first layer. Subjected dopamine, turned from signal into noise. Dopamine was never meant to fill your day. It was meant to punctuate it. A spike, a direction, then silence. That silence mattered. It allowed your nervous system to reset. It allowed effort to feel meaningful. It allowed reward to land. Modern life removed that silence. Now dopamine fires constantly, not in peaks, in static. And static destroys signal. When everything is stimulating, nothing stands out. When everything feels urgent, nothing feels important. When reward is everywhere, motivation collapses. This is the paradox you're living inside. You are surrounded by stimulation, yet struggle to feel motivated. You have access to endless novelty, yet feel chronically bored. This isn't contradiction, it's saturation. Your dopamine system no longer points you toward meaning. It buzzes endlessly without direction. And a buzzing system cannot focus. Because focus requires contrast. Contrast between effort and reward, between silence and stimulation, between waiting and arrival. You erased that contrast. So your brain can no longer tell what deserves sustained attention. Everything feels equally bland, equally unimportant, equally disposable. This is why starting feels hard, why continuing feels harder, why finishing feels empty. Dopamine noise flattens experience. You don't feel deep lows anymore, but you don't feel deep highs either. You hover, not depressed, not satisfied, restless. Restlessness is the emotional signature of dopamine overload. Your brain keeps asking for something new, not because the old thing failed, but because novelty became the baseline. Once novelty is baseline, nothing satisfies, so you escalate. Shorter content, faster cuts, more extreme stimulation. Your attention adapts again. Now, even moderate stimulation feels slow. This is why long-form thinking feels heavy, why books feel demanding, why single-tasking feels almost painful. Your brain is not resisting focus, it is resisting dopamine withdrawal. Because when you remove stimulation, dopamine levels drop. That drop feels like discomfort, not dramatic discomfort, a subtle emptiness, a faint agitation. You interpret that as boredom. It isn't. It's recalibration trying to happen. But you interrupt it every time. You reach for your phone. You switch tabs. You seek relief. So recalibration never completes. Your brain never returns to baseline. And without baseline, focus is impossible. Focus does not happen in high dopamine states. It happens after dopamine settles. That is why athletes talk about rhythm, why artists talk about immersion, why thinkers talk about stillness. Stillness is not absence, it is preparation, but you rarely reach it now. Your environment keeps you aroused just enough to stay restless. This restlessness feels like energy. It isn't. It's agitation without direction. Agitation burns energy. Direction concentrates it. You burn energy constantly and wonder why you feel tired. This is dopamine noise at work. It also distorts desire. You don't want things deeply anymore. You want them briefly. Interest spikes fast, then dies. You mistake this for lack of passion. It isn't. It's overstimulation. Your dopamine system can't sustain desire when it's constantly being reset. Desire requires deprivation. Not complete deprivation, but enough absence to build tension. You never allow tension to build. You release it immediately. Scroll, click, switch. Relief arrives before longing matures, so nothing grows roots. This is why goals feel less compelling now, why long-term projects lose their pull, why commitment feels heavy. Dopamine noise teaches your brain that waiting is unnecessary, so waiting feels wrong. But focus is waiting with intention. You cannot focus without tolerating delay, and dopamine culture trained you to escape delay instantly. This is not about self-control. It's about signal integrity. Your dopamine signal is corrupted, not broken, overwritten. When signal becomes noise, systems fail. Your brain keeps seeking reward, but no reward satisfies. So you feel distracted, unmotivated, foggy, not because you lack drive, because drive has no direction. Direction requires quiet. Quiet allows signal to reemerge, but quiet feels uncomfortable now, so you avoid it. You stay stimulated and wonder why nothing sticks. This is the loop. And until dopamine returns to being a signal instead of background static, focus will remain elusive. Not because you can't concentrate, because your brain doesn't know what's worth concentrating on anymore. Why boredom now feels like pain? Boredom used to be neutral, a pause, an empty space. Now it feels hostile. The moment stimulation drops, something tightens in you. Not fear, agitation. A pressure to do something, anything, just not this, that. Reaction didn't exist naturally. It was trained. Boredom is not the absence of interest. It is the absence of reward. And in dopamine culture, absence feels like deprivation. Your nervous system no longer interprets boredom as rest. It interprets it as loss. Loss of stimulation, loss of engagement, loss of relief. So it signals discomfort. This is why you reach for your phone without thinking, why silence feels wrong, why waiting feels intolerable. Your brain is trying to correct a perceived deficit, but the deficit isn't real. The expectation is. You trained your nervous system to expect constant input. Remove the input, and it protests. This protest feels physical. Restlessness, irritation, a vague sense that something is off. You call this boredom. It isn't. It's withdrawal from constant reward. In earlier environments, boredom was the threshold. Cross it, and something happened. Imagination surfaced, thought deepened, curiosity activated. Now you never cross it. You exit immediately. So the threshold keeps moving closer. What once took hours of stillness to reach now triggers discomfort in minutes, sometimes seconds. Your tolerance collapsed. Tolerance is not moral strength. It's neurological capacity. Capacity only grows when tested. You stopped testing it. So boredom now feels like pain. And pain demands relief. Relief is everywhere. Scroll, switch, check. Each relief reinforces the lesson. Boredom is bad. Escape is good. This lesson embeds itself. Over time, your brain stops offering focus as an option. It skips straight to avoidance, because avoidance worked before. This is why you struggle to start tasks that require sustained attention. The resistance you feel isn't laziness, it's conditioned aversion. Your brain learned that stillness equals discomfort, so it tries to protect you. Protection looks like distraction. You think you're sabotaging yourself. You're not. Your nervous system is doing exactly what it was trained to do. This training also distorts time perception. Moments without stimulation feel longer, heavier, more draining. Moments with stimulation disappear quickly. Hours scroll by unnoticed. Time compresses. So you gravitate toward what makes time vanish. Not because it's meaningful, because it's painless. Focus, by contrast, makes time visible. You feel minutes pass. You feel effort accumulate. That visibility feels threatening now, because you associate visible effort with discomfort, so you avoid it. This is why even things you enjoy feel harder to begin. Enjoyment used to be enough. Now it isn't. Your brain wants reward before effort. But effort is the gateway. You can't have both. Dopamine culture promised you both. Effortless reward. Your brain believed it. Now it rejects the old sequence. Effort, waiting, reward. It wants reward, relief, repeat. This sequence cannot produce focus. It produces compulsion. Compulsion keeps you moving. Focus keeps you still. Stillness feels unsafe now, so you stay in motion. Motion feels productive. It isn't. It's avoidance dressed as activity. You jump between tasks, you multitask, you stay busy. Busyness feels like engagement, but busyness fragments attention. Fragmented attention cannot go deep. Depth requires staying past boredom, but boredom feels painful, so depth disappears. This is why you feel mentally tired but unfulfilled. You expend energy constantly, but never build momentum. Momentum only forms when you stay through discomfort. Discomfort is where focus begins. But you've been taught to escape it immediately, so focus never has a chance. You mistake this for a personal flaw. It isn't. It's cultural conditioning at the nervous system level. Your brain adapted to an environment that punished boredom with relief. Now boredom triggers alarm, and alarm overrides intention. You cannot think your way out of this, because the reaction is precognitive. It happens before thought. This is why motivation speeches fail, why discipline advice feels hollow, why productivity hacks don't last. They address behavior, not tolerance. Your tolerance for boredom must be rebuilt, not through force, through exposure. But exposure feels uncomfortable, so most people never do it. They keep numbing boredom instead of crossing it. And without crossing it, focus never returns. Not because focus is gone, because it's buried under avoidance. Boredom is not your enemy. It is the doorway you stopped walking through. And every time you turn away, you teach your brain that focus is dangerous. That lesson compounds, until even the thought of sustained attention triggers resistance. This is the quiet tragedy of dopamine culture. It didn't steal your focus directly. It taught you to fear the space where focus lives. Phased rewards destroy long attention. Focus is not built by intensity. It is built by continuity. Continuity requires staying with something when nothing exciting is happening. Dopamine culture trains you to leave precisely at that moment. Every short reward you consume teaches your brain a lesson, not consciously, conditionally. It teaches this: when stimulation drops, exit. This lesson compounds. You don't notice it forming. You only notice the result. You can start things. You struggle to stay. You open a book, read a few pages, feel the pull. You begin a task, make progress, hit resistance, switch. You tell yourself you'll come back later. You rarely do. Not because you don't care, because your brain was trained to associate difficulty with escape. Short rewards are efficient teachers. They arrive fast, they cost nothing. They feel good enough to relieve discomfort, but they come with a hidden price. They interrupt attention cycles before they complete. Attention has phases. At first, it resists. Then it settles. Then it deepens. Most people never reach the second phase anymore. They leave during resistance. Resistance feels like friction, mental heaviness, restlessness. This is normal. It is the gate. Short rewards convince you the gate is a wall, so you stop trying to pass through it. Every time you exit early, you reinforce the habit. Your brain learns, we don't stay. Over time, staying feels unnatural. This is how long attention dies. Not in crisis, in convenience. Your environment offers you an escape hatch every few seconds. Why endure difficulty when relief is instant? Your brain is rational. It chooses relief. But relief is not neutral. Relief collapses momentum. Momentum is fragile. It requires uninterrupted time, not hours. Consistency. Every interruption resets the cycle. You must re-enter resistance again and again and again. Eventually, you stop trying. You begin avoiding tasks that require depth. Not consciously, emotionally. They feel heavy before you even begin. This heaviness is anticipatory. Your brain predicts discomfort and preemptively resists, so focus feels exhausting before it starts. Short rewards also distort effort-reward ratios. Your brain recalibrates what effort should produce. You begin expecting payoff quickly. When it doesn't arrive, you disengage. This expectation is fatal to mastery. Mastery requires long stretches of low reward. Repetition, refinement, boredom. Dopamine culture reframes boredom as failure, so you abandon the process early. You bounce between interests. You call it curiosity. It's conditioned impatience. Curiosity stays. Impatience switches. You switch. Over time, this switching fragments identity. You don't become known for depth. You become known for range. Range feels impressive. Depth feels slow. But depth is where meaning accumulates. Short rewards destroy that accumulation. They keep resetting you to zero. You live in a constant beginner state, always starting, rarely finishing. Finishing requires tolerance. Tolerance requires exposure. Exposure requires resisting the urge to escape. Short rewards remove that resistance. They make escape automatic. This is why your attention feels weaker than before. Not because you lost capacity, because you stopped training it. Attention is a muscle. It atrophies when unused. You've been using something else instead. Reactivity. Reactivity feels active. It isn't. It's motion without direction. Direction only emerges when you stay. Stay past boredom, past friction, past the urge to quit. Short rewards sabotage that staying. They teach your brain that relief is always one action away, so the urge to escape becomes louder, sooner, stronger. This is not a failure of character. It's conditioning working perfectly. Your environment optimized for short engagement, not long focus. Long focus doesn't monetize well. Short engagement does. So short rewards dominate. They are not evil. They are efficient. Efficient at capturing attention. Efficient at breaking continuity. You pay the cost. You feel scattered, restless, unfulfilled. You mistake this for lack of purpose. It's lack of uninterrupted attention. Purpose emerges from sustained effort. Effort requires staying with discomfort. Discomfort is numbed by short rewards, so purpose never forms. This is why so many people feel directionless now, not because they lack ambition, because their attention never stays long enough to organize their life. Organization requires hierarchy. Hierarchy requires deciding what matters more than what. Short rewards flatten hierarchy. Everything feels equally clickable, equally tempting, equally trivial. So nothing dominates. Focus dies when nothing dominates. Your attention cannot serve 10 masters. Short rewards create 10. Focus requires 1. Until short rewards lose their authority, long attention cannot return. Not gradually, structurally. Focus died when effort lost meaning. Focus collapses when effort feels pointless. Not pointless in theory, pointless in the body. There was a time when effort meant something because it led somewhere predictable. You worked, you struggled, you waited, and eventually something changed. The change didn't come quickly, but it came reliably. That reliability mattered. Your nervous system learned a simple rule. Effort is worth tolerating. Dopamine culture broke that rule. Not by removing effort, by divorcing it from outcome. You now exert effort constantly, but rarely toward anything that accumulates. You type, scroll, react, switch. Effort is spent. Nothing builds. So your brain quietly concludes something dangerous. Effort is waste. Not consciously, physiologically. Your nervous system stops trusting effort because effort no longer produces transformation. Transformation requires continuity. Continuity requires staying. Staying requires resisting escape. You don't resist escape anymore. You are offered it instantly. So effort feels like friction without reward. This is why starting feels heavy, why continuing feels pointless, why finishing feels empty. Your brain isn't asking, "Can I do this?" It's asking, "Why bother?" That question didn't come from philosophy. It came from experience. You've trained your brain on thousands of micro efforts that went nowhere. Clicks that vanished, posts that disappeared, tasks that reset tomorrow. Nothing lasted long enough to justify strain. So your brain adapted. It stopped investing. Focus requires investment, not motivation. Commitment of energy toward delayed payoff. Your brain no longer believes in delayed payoff because it lives in a world where payoff is immediate or non-existent. This creates a subtle nihilism of effort. You don't feel hopeless, you feel indifferent. Indifference is worse. Hope can be mobilized. Indifference cannot. Indifference says, "This won't matter anyway, so focus." Doesn't even try. You might still want results. You might still desire progress. But desire without trust in effort produces paralysis. You want the outcome. You don't trust the process. And without trust, focus collapses. This is why productivity advice fails you. It assumes effort still feels meaningful. It doesn't. Not in your body. Your body learned that effort leads to more effort, not resolution. So it resists. You experience that resistance as distraction, as fog, as lack of discipline. It's none of those. It's learned futility. Not dramatic futility, subtle. You still function, you still work, you still perform. But you do so shallowly, just enough to move, not enough to transform. Transformation requires sustained effort under uncertainty. Dopamine culture removed uncertainty by promising constant feedback. Likes, metrics, notifications. Feedback feels like progress. It isn't. Feedback is not outcome. It's stimulation. Your brain confuses the two. So it expends energy chasing feedback instead of building something real. Real things grow slowly, silently, often without applause. Your brain was trained to expect applause immediately. Without it, effort feels empty. So focus dies. Not because you can't concentrate, because your brain no longer sees the point. This is why long projects feel impossible now. They ask you to work without reassurance, without validation, without relief. Your nervous system interprets that as danger, so it pulls you away. You don't lack willpower, you lack faith in effort. That faith was eroded systematically. Every short task, every reset, every interrupted cycle. You trained your brain to live in a world where nothing concludes. So it stopped committing. Commitment without conclusion feels like imprisonment. Focus requires commitment. So focus feels like a trap. Until effort regains meaning, focus will not return. Meaning does not come from motivation. It comes from evidence. Evidence that staying changes something. Right now, most of what you do resets instantly. So your brain treats staying as irrational. This is the core wound, and it cannot be healed with hacks. It can only be healed by rebuilding trust between effort and outcome. Slowly, painfully, deliberately. Until then, your focus will keep dissolving. Not because you're broken, because your experience taught you to stop believing. Why your mind now craves interruption. Interruption used to be an accident. Now it is a craving. Your mind does not merely tolerate disruption anymore, it seeks it. Not consciously, conditionally. The moment focus begins to stabilize, something inside you looks for an exit, a check, a switch, a reason to break the thread. This isn't distraction, it's anticipation. Your brain has learned that interruption brings relief. Relief from effort. Relief from uncertainty. relief from staying too long in one place. So it reaches for it. Automatically. Interruption became a reward. Every time you break focus, dopamine rises briefly, not because interruption is pleasurable, because it resolves tension. Focus builds tension before it delivers clarity. Interruption dissolves tension instantly. Your nervous system prefers the faster option. Over time, this preference hardens into a need. You don't just lose focus, you become uncomfortable without interruption. Unbroken attention starts to feel unnatural, suspicious, heavy. So your mind sabotages it. It invents reasons. I should check this. I'll come back in a second. I need a break. The reasons feel rational. They are reflexes. Reflexes don't ask permission. You live in an environment where interruption is constant and rewarded. Messages arrive, feeds update, tabs beckon. Your brain associates interruption with relevance. When you interrupt, you feel connected, informed, involved. When you stay focused, you feel cut off. That feeling is new. In the past, focus was connection. To work, to craft, to thought. Now, connection is external, so focus feels like isolation. Isolation triggers anxiety. Your brain reacts by pulling you back into the stream, not because it hates focus, because it fears disconnection. This is why even when you remove obvious distractions, focus still breaks. The craving lives inside now. Your brain learned to expect novelty at short intervals. When novelty doesn't arrive, it generates restlessness. Restlessness demands resolution. Interruption resolves it. So the loop continues. This loop also distorts your sense of urgency. Everything feels like it might matter, like something could be missed. Fear of missing out is not social. It's neurological. Your brain fears losing stimulation. Stimulation became synonymous with safety. Without it, you feel uneasy. So interruption feels protective. Focus feels risky. This is a complete inversion of function. Focus was supposed to be the state where things happened. Interruption was supposed to be the exception. Now, interruption is the baseline. Baseline states feel normal. Abnormal states feel wrong. So when you try to focus, your body resists. Not with thoughts, with sensation, restlessness, tension, an urge to move. You can't argue with that urge. You can only notice it. Notice that it isn't random. It appears at predictable moments, right when effort deepens, right when boredom approaches, right before clarity might emerge. Interruption blocks clarity, not intentionally, systemically. Your brain learned that clarity is slow. Interruption is fast. Fast wins. This is why you consume information constantly, but integrate very little. Integration requires uninterrupted time, time without reward. Your brain doesn't trust that time anymore, so it fills it. You don't finish thoughts, you skim them. You don't sit with questions, you answer them prematurely. You don't let confusion resolve. You escape it. Confusion is uncomfortable, but it is necessary. Confusion is the stage before understanding. Interruption eliminates confusion by replacing it with novelty. You feel better. You learn nothing. Over time, this erodes confidence in your own thinking. You don't trust your ability to work through difficulty, because you rarely do. You trust interruption more than persistence. That trust becomes identity. You describe yourself as someone who can't focus. That description reinforces behavior. Your brain aligns with the story. But the story isn't who you are. It's what you were trained to do. Interruption didn't just fracture your attention, it reshaped your relationship with effort. Effort now feels like something to escape. Interruption feels like relief. Until that relationship changes, focus will always feel like force, not flow. This is why removing apps or setting timers rarely works long-term. The craving remains. You didn't remove the habit, you removed the outlet. The habit finds another channel. True focus will only return when interruption loses its emotional payoff, not when you fight it, when you outgrow it. Outgrowing it requires staying through discomfort without relief. Not forever, long enough for your nervous system to relearn something essential. That staying does not kill you. That boredom passes. That clarity arrives. But you have to stay long enough to see it. Most people never do. They interrupt at the exact moment focus would begin to form, and then they conclude focus is impossible. It isn't. It's just unfamiliar now. Your mind craves interruption because it was trained to associate it with safety. Undoing that training will feel unsafe at first. That is how you know it's working. Focus returns only after withdrawal. There is a phase no one warns you about, because it sounds extreme and it feels uncomfortable. Withdrawal. Not dramatic withdrawal, not collapse, a quiet recalibration. The moment you stop feeding your brain constant stimulation, your mind does not become clear, it becomes noisy. Thoughts race, restlessness spikes. Everything feels harder than it should. Most people misinterpret this phase. They think focus is getting worse. They think they are failing. They think something is wrong. Nothing is wrong. This is what happens when a system loses its constant supply. Your brain was adapted to high-frequency reward. Remove it, and the system protests. Not because it's broken, because it's adjusting. Dopamine withdrawal does not feel like sadness. It feels like irritation, impatience, a constant urge to escape. Your mind looks for stimulation everywhere, not because you need it, because you were trained to expect it. This phase is where most people quit. They return to distraction and say, "See, I can't focus." What they really experienced was detox. Focus does not return immediately when stimulation stops. It returns after tolerance rebuilds. Tolerance only rebuilds when you stay. Stay through the restlessness. Stay through the boredom. Stay through the urge to escape. This staying feels wrong at first. Your nervous system signals danger. It tells you to move, to switch, to relieve. That signal is lying. It is not danger. It is absence. Absence of the constant dopamine spikes your brain became dependent on. In this absence, something important begins. Baseline returns. Not excitement, not pleasure. Baseline. A state where your brain is no longer buzzing, where thoughts slow naturally, where attention can settle without force. This state feels unfamiliar now. So unfamiliar that many people mistake it for depression. It isn't. It is neutrality. Neutrality is the ground where focus grows. Focus does not come from stimulation, it comes from calm. But calm cannot exist in a nervous system addicted to reward. So withdrawal is required. Not total isolation, not deprivation. Reduction. Long enough for your brain to relearn contrast. Contrast between effort and reward, between silence and stimulation, between waiting and relief. During withdrawal, everything feels dull. Colors flatten, motivation drops, interest feels muted. This phase terrifies people. They think they've lost passion. They haven't. They've lost artificial excitement. Real interest is quieter, slower, deeper. It doesn't shout, it pulls. But you cannot feel that pull while dopamine noise dominates. Withdrawal clears the noise. Once cleared, something subtle happens. You begin to stay with things longer. Not because you force yourself, because the urge to escape weakens. Focus no longer feels like effort. It feels like settling. You notice time stretching again, moments gaining texture, thoughts completing themselves. This does not feel euphoric. It feels normal. Normal is rare now. This is the danger of dopamine culture. It made normal feel unbearable. So when normal returns, people panic. They mistake calm for emptiness, stability for boredom, silence for lack. But silence is where your mind reorganizes itself. During this phase, your attention becomes choosier. Not everything pulls you anymore. Not every stimulus feels urgent. You regain selectivity. Selectivity is focus. You begin choosing what deserves your attention instead of reacting to everything. That choice feels empowering, but also uncomfortable, because you are no longer distracted from yourself. Thoughts surface that were previously buried under stimulation, questions you avoided, discomfort you numbed. This is part of withdrawal. You are no longer anesthetized. Most people return to distraction at this point, not because they can't focus, because focus exposes things. Exposure feels risky, but without exposure, nothing integrates. Focus is not just about productivity, it is about confrontation. Confronting boredom, confronting discomfort, confronting your own thoughts without escape. Dopamine culture protected you from this confrontation. It kept you entertained enough to never sit still with yourself. Withdrawal removes that protection, and in doing so, returns authority to you. Authority over attention, over impulse, over direction. This authority does not arrive dramatically, it settles. You stop craving interruption, not because you are disciplined, because interruption no longer offers relief. Relief is no longer needed. Your nervous system is calm enough to stay. That calm allows focus to exist naturally. Focus is not something you force. It is something that appears when the environment stops hijacking you. Withdrawal is the price. Not forever, long enough. Long enough for your brain to remember how to wait, how to stay, how to let reward come later. Without this phase, focus will always feel like strain. With it, focus feels inevitable, not constant, but available. And availability is enough. You don't need superhuman concentration. You need a nervous system that isn't constantly begging for relief. That is what dopamine culture took from you, and what withdrawal gives back. When attention becomes sovereign again. Something has shifted now. Not in your habits first, in your nervous system. You no longer experience focus as a battle you keep losing. You experience it as something that returns when conditions are right. That distinction matters. You stopped blaming yourself for distraction, stopped framing restlessness as weakness, stopped assuming something inside you was broken. You see it clearly now. Your mind wasn't failing, it was adapting. Adapting to an environment that never allowed it to settle. Adapting to constant reward without meaning. Adapting to interruption disguised as connection. That realization alone changes how you relate to your attention. You no longer chase focus aggressively. You protect the space where it can emerge. Protection is quieter than effort, but far more powerful. You begin to notice how often you used stimulation as anesthesia, how quickly you reached for relief, how rarely you allowed discomfort to pass on its own. Not out of weakness, out of conditioning. Now you pause. Not dramatically, deliberately. You let boredom exist without naming it an enemy. You let restlessness burn without obeying it. You let thoughts complete themselves instead of cutting them off. At first, this felt wrong, empty, almost pointless. Now it feels grounding. Your mind no longer needs constant reassurance. It no longer panics in silence. It no longer demands novelty every few seconds. Not because you forced discipline, because you removed dependency. Dependency was the problem, not distraction, and dependency always hides behind comfort. You notice something else too. Your sense of time changes. Moments feel longer, not slower, fuller. You can stay with a task without negotiating with yourself every minute. You can read without scanning for escape. You can think without feeling rushed toward a conclusion. That steadiness was always possible. It was just buried. Buried under noise, under reward, under constant interruption. As the noise recedes, something unfamiliar appears. Patience. Not patience as virtue, patience as capacity. The capacity to stay without needing immediate payoff. The capacity to tolerate uncertainty without relief. The capacity to let meaning emerge instead of demanding it instantly. This capacity changes how effort feels. Effort no longer feels like waste, it feels like investment again. Not because results are guaranteed, but because staying itself feels coherent. You trust the process of staying now. That trust rebuilds slowly, but once it's there, focus stops feeling fragile. You don't panic when attention wavers. You don't collapse when boredom appears. You don't interpret resistance as failure. You recognize it as a threshold. And thresholds no longer scare you. You stay. Staying becomes your quiet advantage. While others constantly switch, you remain. While others chase stimulation, you tolerate absence. While others burn energy reacting, you conserve it by choosing. That choice is subtle, but irreversible. You are no longer owned by every impulse, no longer pulled by every notification, no longer convinced that relief must be immediate. You learned something deeper than focus. You learned restraint. Restraint is not repression. It is sovereignty. The ability to decide what deserves access to your mind. That ability changes how you see the world. You notice how much of modern life is designed to fragment you, how little of it rewards depth, how rarely stillness is respected. You no longer feel obligated to participate in all of it. You choose selectively. This selectivity sharpens your identity. You stop defining yourself by what you consume. You start defining yourself by what you can sustain. Sustained effort, sustained thought, sustained presence. Presence is what distraction took from you and what you reclaimed. You are not constantly stimulated anymore, but you are more alive. Because aliveness does not come from constant reward. It comes from continuity, from staying long enough for something real to form. You don't feel endlessly productive. You feel grounded. Grounded people don't rush. They don't chase. They don't panic when things slow down. They understand that slowness is not failure. It is depth forming. You don't need to optimize every moment now. You don't need to fill every gap. You don't need to escape every discomfort. You let your mind breathe. And in that breathing space, attention stabilizes. Not perfectly, not permanently, but reliably enough to build something real. That reliability changes how you trust yourself. You no longer see your mind as an obstacle. You see it as an instrument that responds to how it's treated. You stopped overstimulating it, stopped punishing it for adapting, stopped confusing addiction for preference. In doing so, you reclaimed authorship. Not over productivity, over attention. And attention is where life actually happens. Now that you understand why your focus disappeared and what it costs to bring it back, what discomfort are you still numbing instead of staying with long enough to let it change you?